So our guest tonight is Ru Freeman. She's the author of A Disobedient Girl and On Sal Mal Lane, and she's the editor of the anthologies Extraordinary Rendition, American Writers on Palestine, and Indivisible, Global Leaders on Shared Security. She directs the Artist Network at Narrative 4. And with her tonight as a special guest, and we're very, very grateful to Anna for being able to step in on short notice, is Anna Badkhen. She's the author of 6 published books. Her 7th book, Bright Unbearable Reality, comes out in October 2022, and you can catch her at the Free Library for that book when it comes out. Her awards include the Guggenheim Fellowship, the Barry Lopez Visiting Writer in Ethics and Community Fellowship, the Selden Award for Psychologists for Social Responsibility for writing about civilians in war zones. Badkhen was born in the Soviet Union and is a US citizen. And the book tonight is the new collection of short stories, is Ru's Sleeping Alone. In this collection of rich and textured stories, Ru Freeman explores what it means to cross borders, both real and imagined. A cast of misfits who are young and old, singled, coupled, entire families, confront startling changes wrought by difficult circumstances or harrowing choices, stories that are rendered with sensitivity, dignity, grace, and I would also add to this official press release with very deep levels of surprise and insight in these stories. The stories span the world, moving from Maine to Sri Lanka, from Dublin to Philadelphia, paying exquisite attention to the dance between the intimate details of our lives and our public selves. All of them explore the question, what does it mean to be not only foreign to people around you, to be foreign to yourself? And our partner tonight hosting this event is Blue Stoop, a home for Philly writers. And I want to introduce the brand new director of Blue Stoop, Joseph Thomas, who's here with us tonight to say welcome from Blue Stoop. And welcome, Joseph.
Hey, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, Elliot, Ru, Anna, and everyone for showing up. I'll be real quick. I'm Joseph Thomas. I'm the incoming director of programs for Blue Stoop. So if you were getting a bunch of emails from Emma talking about events, seeing or reading the newsletter, some of that stuff will now come through me going forward. And I'll give a brief introduction of Blue Stoop for folks who don't know. Blue Stoop is a nonprofit home for Philly writers that nurtures an inclusive literary community by creating pathways to access writing education, inspiration, and professional support, and celebrating Philadelphia's rich writing tradition. We offer classes in the craft of writing, partner with local bookstores, as in the event today, and venues to offer live author events like this one, run a monthly Book of the Month series that uplifts Philly authors with new books coming out like Ru Freeman's, and offer opportunities for community building and career development for writers and readers alike. And you can also check us out on bluestoop.org and sign up for our newsletter to stay in touch, figure out ways to connect, to donate, and to find out about more events going on in Philly that are through partners or other bookstores and such. Thank you again, everyone.
I will just say, if you have questions as we go along, please enter them into the chat. I'll be monitoring them in the chat and then pose them at the end on behalf of the community here tonight. Thank you for joining us. Ru, it's all yours.
Thanks for showing up tonight, particularly thanks to Blue Stoop and Maine Point Books for hosting, and hello to Joseph Thomas, who's, it's great to have you on board. But I want to especially thank Anna for stepping in at such short notice to do this event for us and to take Madeline's place. It's really great. One of the events I had recently, we talked about literary friendships and the friendships that really, we kind of take care of each other along the way, and it goes beyond the things we write to supporting each other in life as well. So this is a great example of that, I have to say. So I'm really happy to be here with Anna, and I'm going to turn it over to her because it's actually she's the MC.
Hi, everybody. I'm Anna, and it is my great pleasure to be here today to talk about Sleeping Alone, talk with Ru again. I haven't seen you in person in a little bit. It's been the pandemic. I'm going to interrogate you, but first, I would love for you to read a little bit from the book, because just to give our audience tonight a taste of what a delicious writer you are.
All right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to read from the last story in the book, Fault Lines, and I'm going to read. It's three different voices in there, and I'm going to read a little piece from Gabriela, who is one of the voices. And I'm going to use my dying phone to try to get some light. And if the light goes out, well, I hope I do not. There we go. Gabriela. You never think that things will turn out as badly or as well as they do. When you turn 16 and you have no boyfriend and you are not pregnant, and everyone says, yes, even Abuela, who has had you pegged as a malparida since you were 7 years old and lifted your dress in front of the whole school while singing the national anthem, that you've beaten the odds and broken the family tradition of being knocked up before your quinceanera, you want to believe it. You stroke your flat belly and then you go and get one of those diamond dust studs put in your navel, the type that has the thin dangling gold chain that points toward your not available kuka, because you want to show it off, how off limits you are, how you are not like the rest of the Roman sisters or your mother or your aunts, particularly not Titi Maria, who was pregnant at 14, or even your grandmother. The thing is, you put a sweet chain like that, which cost all your quinceanera money, in your belly button, your sweet diving pool belly button, and the only thing you want to do is to make sure everyone can see it. So you stop listening to the family chorus and you wear nothing but crop tops and low-rise shorts and jeans and skirts with the waist rolled down. And you are just like all the stupid girls with tats that you scorned because, oh my God, they carved the names of boyfriends and hearts between their breasts and on the skin over the angel wing bones on their backs, and were never after seen in real clothes, only tee-back tops and V-neck shirts that were not t-shirts. Who were they kidding? They were ho-halters. Ricardo said it was the jewelry in your middle that made him love you so much, that made him love you and bump into you in the hallways so he could see how the gold chain swung against your beautiful skin like a pendulum. So what if you had to spend junior year sitting sideways at your desk and pretending you didn't notice Mr. Bomsey staring at your ballooning chest all through English class, and you had to take the diamond dust stud in its gold chain out, and you didn't get to graduate because whatever that felt like, Luis is 15 and Ricardo still treats you like you were born a princessa before he made you his queen with all of that loving. And now, after all these years, you might even get a nursing certificate or something in the medical field that you could use from the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, which is around the corner from your job, so close that you could go there after work. That's what Iris said when she handed you the brochure that she had brought home from the library near where she works. At first you had laughed because those brochures were not there at the little library near where Ricardo works at the high school, and where you have waited for him on the evenings when he's taken you to watch Luis run at the track meets. And you love watching Luis run because his feet move as though God himself has taught him how to walk on air. But you don't mention this part to Iris because none of her boys can run, though both libraries belong to the same district. And maybe you joked it was because that library was filled with Morenos, just like the community pool near there, and maybe nobody wanted to encourage those people to go back to school. But Iris did not laugh. She just said, you got your GED, now give them a call. It's time. And you felt sorry and made a trade of asado de puerco for her to take home, because even though her boy DM had also applied for the same program, only Luis was accepted. And now Luis lives at the ABC house, not too far from where you both work. He's learning to tread water, he says, at the private pools of his friends' homes in the better neighborhoods, because he goes to their school now, where he has a brand new MacBook Pro computer for free, like all the other students, plus tutors and special attention, because he's going to be a success story. That is what the program director told you when you hugged Luis and cried when you had to leave him there and go home. Of course, Abuela scoffed. They want to take my boy. She calls Luis her boy, even though you were the one who gave birth to him, and she was so disappointed in you that she still only speaks indirectly to you. They want to take my boy and put him in the rich people's school so they can show off how rich schools can help poor kids. Why not give some of that money to his school so all the kids in the school can have what they have? And he wanted to explain to her the way the program director had explained to you that it was not just money in poor schools, but the environment that made the difference, that your community and your family and your general trajectory were what held kids like Louis back. But you couldn't get your tongue adjusted around all those words. So you don't say anything because you know she'd just say vete a la mierda and make you feel stupid for having had the nerve to address her. But also because Ricardo is looking at you with that I told you so gleam and sucking his back teeth. So you just do the same and look away because you agree. You agree that there was nothing wrong with your community and your family and your trajectory. You got pregnant and you did the right thing, and so did Ricardo, and you got married, and you had both always done the best you could for all your children. And if you were asked, you'd even say you were doing your best for theirs. Because how would Mira keep her job that takes her all over creation, doing God knows what? And how would Ari, which is short for Aristides, keep his, which pays not only for his second family, but also for his first, which comes with not one, but two daughters in college on the other side of the country, and a son, and don't even get you started on the first wife who drives the car with the top roll down every time she pulls out of her double driveway, 2 doors from her ex-husband's house, the one she bought, so Mira says, just to spite him. It makes you happy, angry, happy, sad, angry to hear about all the wonderful teachers, most of whom are male in the school that Louis goes to over past City Line Avenue, when neither Rosita nor Ricky Jr. have teachers like that, because they still go to the school that DM and his brothers do on this side. And the only male is the principal, who is a hijo de puta, who always stares at your chest and tells you how pretty Rosita is. You stay silent and you think that maybe they too will go to the other school and live in a house with tutors. And all you can do is pray that they'll last, beautiful as they are, with Ricardo's eyes and your mouth and color, without babies to be looked after before they have finished being yours. Mrs. Petralia, who prefers to be called Mira, is happy to hear that you're going to try to go back to school, though she insists she cannot manage without you because she and Ari are so busy all the time and her children need you. Effie and Athena are so used to you being here when they come home from school, Gabby, how will we manage without you? The girls are old enough now. They will be all right. You say that, and it sounds heartless, and you know that it is probably not true. The only person those girls see reliably is you. But what else can you say? You're hoping that Ricardo will be able to find you work in the cafeteria at the middle school, which would pay you more than you make now taking care of the Petralia children. And then you could look at all the classes you might need to finish if you want to take this osteopathic medicine business seriously. You'd prefer the high school because then, like Ricardo, you'll get to see Luis every now and again as he walks through the halls or goes to the locker room after school to change for track. Even if, like Ricardo, you would not wave or meet his eyes or in any way acknowledge any relationship, even though that would be almost impossible for you, you'd do it. You're sure you would. Still, despite all that longing for what you really want, you know you will take what you can get because, as Iris says, it is time. But it doesn't work out that way. That's the thing about things never being as good, as bad, or as good. If he breaks a foot, so you have to keep working, and now you have more hours and enough money so you can call up the school and see what classes you might be able to take there, but too many late nights, which means you obviously cannot enroll at the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine. It does not sound like the kind of place that would make allowances for students like you. And you tell yourself it's all right, because the middle school didn't have a vacancy anyway. And you should be paying more attention to Rosita. She's at that age, as Abuela keeps saying. And Madre de Dios, you do not want Rosita to have to drop out of school, even the same subpar school you went to. And isn't life like this anyway? And isn't family like this? What does it matter if only one of your children gets to go to the rich people's school, and if only one of you gets to watch your son in these last few years before he leaves home, and if only one of the females in your family finishes high school? When you put it all together, aren't you a success story too?
Thank you. I love the messy women and girls at the heart of your book. And I love how they weave together into a world, and how in one passage you weave a world together, as with this passage you just read, Gabriela. I had to reread this book, obviously before we spoke, and I thought I had favorites the first time I read it, and now I think I have other favorites. So I'm not going to name any names, but I have underlined deliciousness in each of these stories, all of which are so different. And the language in all of them is so different. And the things that you notice and the things that you make us pay attention to are so, they almost like they come from different highs. So for example, this is the beginning of the bridge. And those of you who have already purchased the book, this is on page 117. This is how the story begins. This is an introduction to a story that is probably in the same tradition as Tolstoy's Anna Karenina or Dickens, right? The right instant blesses and condemns us. For some people, it is on Fridays, because that is when parts become available, essentials like hearts, because of all the traffic accidents. Or this absolute loveliness on page 62, which is in the story Sleeping Alone, in which a caterer approaches our main character before a party and says, "Want a little taste of this?" she asks, and lifts the silver cover on a platter. Inside are reddish brown, sweet and sour meatballs glistening in gravy. She skewers a meatball, then holds it up until I open my mouth. She uses the same toothpick to put one in hers. We stand there, our cheeks bulging, enjoying the particularly delicious taste of stolen food. She reaches over to wipe the corners of my mouth when I'm done. The image of using the same toothpick after putting one in the mouth of her hostess is a fantastic sign of care in my legend, in my story. And it's a fantastic thing to notice in a story that is quite brutal. And I love how you pay attention to these beautiful lovelinesses in our world at the same time as you expose its often severity and brutality. So I wanted to ask you on that note, I wanted to ask you, how do we belong in the world? What is belonging, and is it possible?
Gosh, that's a big question. It's a good one. And I mean, I will define belonging, I guess, from my perspective, which is engagement. It's being involved in the world, because that is the only belonging I feel we can actually have, is how much of it is. And when I say engagement, I don't mean necessarily passing through engagement, you know, like you can be engaged walking through a mall, but it is more a sense of like, what is it that we're giving to the world as much as we are absorbing what we see around us. So I guess, you know, in a very, very briefly, that's how I would describe. Everything to me stems from that, from our ability and our willingness to be up there, even in the mall, even passing by through the mall. It's not saying, okay, this mall is, these people are useless, nothing about this environment matters, but seeing the environment of a mall in terms of why it even exists, why does it exist, what's in it, who's making the things that are in it, who's buying them, who are the people who are in it, what might they be seeking in that mall. All of that to me is that kind of that engagement that is transformative for us as human beings personally in our own psyche, but also to me leads to some kind of gesture toward the world. So
do you think that curiosity about what makes the world, how the world is built, curiosity about the architecture of the world. You have a story, Retaining Walls, which is literally about an architecture of a house. It's about a builder, right? A person who does construction, and he enters the spaces, and he enters the spaces that are also lived spaces. So they're spaces inhabited by families, and so he enters the families as well, with a degree of curiosity, but also with a degree of kind of jadedness. What happens when we allow ourselves to step out of the jadedness and be curious, to step out of the, you're walking through a mall, you think it's predictable. What happens when we actually believe that we don't know everything about it and start interacting with it?
Then you start writing stories and poems, right? Because you write. I mean, I write. I don't want to speak for all writers. All writers do their thing their own way, but I write to walk my own self toward a truth that I know, that I didn't know when I began. So to step away from jadedness, to me, is that process, and it's a constant, I think it's a constant thing that you have to practice constantly, because it is so easy to make a quick judgment. It is so easy to say, and I do it 100 times a day. I don't like this. I don't, I did it today. I went to a musical thing. I was like, oh, I don't like this. But then, because I was tired and didn't like it. But then a little time passed, and I was compelled to sit there for various reasons. And I started to actually listen, and I found something. And that thing that I found will emerge in something that I probably write. And that writing may not be about a music a performance, but it'll be about something else that has been informed by my activity and my, that whatever it is that I underwent in that moment of not going the route of feeling jaded and picking and choosing likes and dislikes and prejudices.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was going to go someplace else, but since you brought up prejudices, do you mind reading the last page of Beauty Treatment? It's page 41. And maybe tell us a little bit about set up the story a little bit. But what I want you to read is from Back in My Country.
So Beauty Treatments is about a woman. There are a few women in this audience, men, who've maybe undergone beauty treatments of some sort, a pedicure, manicure, massage, whatever. It is an odd thing to undergo, right? We are very private about everything about us, and then we go to physicians and strip to the bone with gowns that tie in the front or the back, depending, and or we go for beauty treatments and do sort of the same. And it's this awkwardness, and so that was the environment in which this story is unfolding. But it's also an interaction between two very different cultures. So that's where this story ends up here. And she says, "Back in my country, we only take Ayurvedic medicines," Maya told Suzanne calmly, keeping it simple. She saw that there was a way out for her, a way to take back the indiscreet revelations she had made earlier, to give a better image back to the old lady who had brought forth her memories. Yes, she could give her something that would suit her idea of countries and cultures that had things easy with regard to health and healing. We have herbs to heal all things. When someone is sick, they're told to eat certain combinations of vegetables. All the vegetables have medicinal properties. Suzanne, her eyes closed, inhaled deeply beside her. The strength of her exhalation brought a slow, warm touch of air that fluttered about Maya's face. Suzanne's eyes shone with gratitude. "So lucky," she said.
she would give her something that would suit her idea of countries and cultures that had things easy with regard to health and healing. So I love that the story calls me out or calls out the reader, especially if it's a white reader or a Western reader, about assumptions. Something that would suit her idea of countries and cultures. But there is also an element, and you do this throughout the collection. You always have a challenge, a challenge that is thrown to me as a reader, asking me to reconsider, as you maybe reconsider, or maybe as you think I need to reconsider. Which brings me back to what I wanted to read. This is from The Irish Girl, page 103. Dublin came to me on two wings, one at work and quite another at Madeline's. I began my assignment at the Livermore Cheese Company, learning from 9 to 3 each day how to cure, process, and sell cheese. I was to go back someday and launch a cheese factory, a first for the island. But how could cheese compare to Madeline? I think this is my favorite line in the entire book, actually. But how could cheese compare to Madeline? I would watch the curds being separated from the whey and see only the cloud-like patterns on her scarves, the color of her skin. I would stare at the firming mounds, thinking of how the undersides of her fingers looked when she pressed them to her lips to hide a smile, doing it backward, Madeline's way, the hard way, the wrong way. What is it about the wrong way that attracts you? What is it about the wrong way that touches all the characters in the book? Why the wrong way? What is this disobedience? What is this challenge?
I mean, in this case, it's interesting listening to you read my words. It's almost like I'm hearing a new story, and I'm taken back to the enjoyment of writing and the enjoyment of choosing this sequence of language to make this, the patterns of it. And so thank you for reminding me of that. And I'm also reminded of, like, cheese is such a huge thing in Sri Lanka, because we have some cheese now, but it's not a thing we have, and we think of it as this amazing luxurious thing. So to say that cheese could not compare to Madeleine, which might make no sense to someone who's not from a place like that, you see from that person's interiority, it means something different. But the wrong way, I mean, I have this phrase that I've often told my daughters, which is that rules and laws are guidelines. They're not, they're suggestions to act in a certain way, but they're not necessarily, they don't have to dictate how you actually live your entire life. So, so I guess wrong, I don't really see wrong. I just see imagination. There's one way to do it, and then you imagine a different way to do it. So that's kind of how I think of it, not so much as right and wrong as one way, and then this other much more creative, interesting way to do things. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But Anna, I just want to say, as you were talking about prejudice and all that, so Anna has a book coming out in October, and I didn't have a chance in this pell-mell reshuffle to actually look at all of it, but I did look at one of the essays which sort of caught my eye, and it's Acts of Humanity for obvious reasons. The title itself made me think of it, and I managed to read through it. There's a passage that you wrote that I enjoyed, and I'm going to read it out here so that to give people an idea of this book. You say, sometimes I imagine that there is a secret laboratory where scientists are working on a map that, like Jorge Luis Borges's The Book of Sand, has neither a beginning nor an end. It is infinite, all-encompassing of our virtues and iniquities. It holds the man handing out bread by the church and each frangipani tree in waxen blooms and all the torture chambers in every country and each rubber raft and pirogue full of people crossing the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden and the Mediterranean and the Atlantic and the Rio Grande. I imagine that such a laboratory must be somewhere in Eastern Europe, in a World War I barracks built for Austro-Hungarian cavalry officers, though it is not on any map except the one being created in it. No global calamity, no matter how great, ever interrupts the labor of the scientists who are constantly catching up to our transgressions and our feats. And when a scientist dies, that too is recorded on the map, which will never be finished. The lab is subdivided into sections, and each section focuses on one particular part of the world, though I'm not sure whether the parts would be physical or metaphysical. No scientist ever leaves the assigned section, and no one has ever seen the map in progress in its entirety, but I imagine that if anyone does, they would die instantly of grief ache. Then their death also would be entered into the map using a particular map key that has already been designed for it. I just, those two, it just captured that when I say imagination, that to me is this kind of real sense of, it's an attempt to make sense of the world and how the world is, but it is also a reimagining of what it could be or can be or has been or is being, and what we are doing, even by writing a story, is in some ways map making. We are making an account of what we do, environments, people, interactions, relationships, secrets. All of these things are being put into play in what we write. So I really liked that observation that you make and this fictional map that is being made. But what struck me, because you mentioned prejudice earlier, when you located it in this particular part of the world, I thought, well, why does she locate it there? Why not in sub-Saharan Africa or Rajasthan, or, what's the reason? But that too, to answer your previous question about, which I responded to by talking about engagement, is the engagement I'm talking about, which is I'm reading this piece, I'm moved by its beauty, I'm considering the imagination behind it, your intelligence, but I'm also having my own response to the choices that are being made in putting it together. So I don't know, all these questions, let's kind of wrap it up.
I'll tell you, everybody can know Auschwitz is in a former Austro-Hungarian barracks. So that was the illusion, but also a lot of black sites that the United States government created and operated were in Poland, not in sites that had been used to exterminate Jews and queer people and other people of color and the Roma and communists, but nearby. There was one, I think, very close to Treblinka. So Austro-Hungarian barracks in Poland kind of, for some reason, struck me as a good place to, yeah. But let's talk about map making. So we are both recording a world. I write mostly nonfiction and record a world, and you write mostly fiction and record a world in its brokenness. Do you think, and I also see your emails, you sign as author and activist. Do you think that this map making, this record, this addition to the archive that we're creating, do you think that it is a corrective?
I think of it more as a balm than a corrective for the things that are difficult or broken and are irreparable in some ways. I think that what we do is helps. It's a salve, and then and I guess secondarily, therefore, it might be a corrective because you cannot engage in corrective measures if you are not healed in some way. So to me, that is what literature does, all of literature.
I was born in Leningrad, like Brodsky, who was also born in Leningrad. And he wrote about Czesław Miłosz, the Polish poet, another Nobel Prize winner, that he offered people not he wrote that poetry tells people not how to live, but for the sake of what to live. And I think that that extends to, or I hope, not I think, but I hope, I want it to extend to all literature. I want literature to serve as a reminder for the sake of what to live, even just for the sake of a sentence, what is cheese compared to Madeline, or the image of a caterer. And it's such an un-American thing. I'm sorry. I'm stuck on that image because I'm like, what American person would do such a thing? You know, in my culture, in your culture, maybe, but not, you know, just like taking, I think that these images, and again, dear future readers, if you haven't yet read the book, you will see that a lot of the stories are point to the severity of our human condition, but the absolute delight of noticing such beauties, definitely worth living for, just to be able to hold in my hand and to hold in my eyes and to read.
Anna, before you continue, I had a quick thought about that gesture that you point out with the toothpick. I think it is when you're unconscious of anything but the relationship, is when, so going back to rules and things like this, you skip over the protocol because you're more concerned about if it's a theft. You're not really supposed to be helping yourself with this stuff. And there's a social gap between these two people, but there's a deep connection between them. So I think that's kind of what is being conveyed in some ways.
No, it's immense tenderness. It's just, it really fills my heart. It really does fill my heart. I have one final question, and then I know that we have to give everybody who's been kind to join us a chance to talk to you. What does it mean to be sleeping alone?
It's to be full of activity and, you know, to have a very full life, I think, because sleep, I mean, even instead, I did a series of interviews with my 3 daughters, and the first one was asking about sleeping alone and talking actually about, she was talking about the fact that it doesn't matter whom you're with, you're still sleeping. When you go to bed, you're alone. But even if you're you know, you dream and your body does things and your brain does things. And so there's this clamor and clatter and activity that's going on anyway. So so sleeping alone to me is rich. It's like a fullness that I wanted to express, and therefore, I mean, it goes to this cover too. We didn't want it to be something that feels desperate or somehow lonely.
It's absolutely gorgeous.
It is. But it's this exuberance almost. It's this all this color and kites, and it's the sense of someone watching it fall, and
movement in it
and
too.
movement. Yeah. So that's, to me, that's what's supposed to be conveyed by that. And there are so many. I mean, it's such a having thought of the title for the story myself, it seems pompous, but I do think I love the potential for all kinds of meanings to be attached to sleeping alone.
It's a beautiful book. Thank you very much for writing it.
Thanks for reading.
Shall we ask the audience to?
Yeah, we're a small enough group that if people want to unmute and actually ask their question in person, that's totally fine, because we're a small group, so that isn't going to get out of control. And while people are being shy, I also just want to say, Ru, the cover is so astounding. And it is such an explosion of those bright, all those different aqua shades of blue, that it's just so eye-catching and wonderful. And just sets a tone. Like there's this tone of going into these stories, is going into this series of other brightly colored worlds. It's just really lovely.
Thank you. Well, thank Grey Wolf. It's the other people who designed the book.
Thank you, Grey Wolf. I think I saw Shana here. So any questions from our wonderful but quiet, shy fans? I will say, Ru, what are you working on now? And then John has a question after that.
I'm working on a bunch of different projects. Yeah, I guess that's I have a nonfiction collection of essays coming out in spring, I think. But I'm working on other fiction and nonfiction / fiction type of projects.
So John Hennessy asks, which are the characters that you are most haunted by now that the book is done and, long done since you wrote it? And can you talk about the odd couple that the teacher and the student make at the end of Kobe Loves Me?
So I started reading Ellen Hayes' question, and I wasn't quite listening. Now I'm going to read this question. Yeah, I mean, I love the relationship between the teacher and the student, and what I love about it is the unexpectedness of that relationship, but also the fact that it is shaped by their love for somebody else who's actually not there anymore, who was also himself a very complicated person for many people. So it just seemed like a great way to talk about a lot of things that are going on in the country. Obviously race, but also class, but also our kind of shyness around discussing certain types of things or calling out certain kind of easily liberal responses to things that go on in American culture. So those two, for that reason, really wrote their own story. It was, like that was a story that got written at the last moment to take the place of a different story that I had written. But it's one of my favorite stories as well. And which characters am I most haunted by now? Matthew's story is very it's based on something that had a lot of, it's a very tragic story, but and so it comes from that source, and so therefore I think Matthew and Gabriel are, those brothers are very they kind of linger in my mind, but also in First Son, the uncle is very significant to me, because he's based on again on my uncle, and so and he was someone I loved very much. He's not there. I mean, a lot of these people aren't, they're not in my life really, but they're in my life as stories. So he was very, I really cared deeply for him, and so he has stayed in my mind as well.
And then Ellen's question was about some of the stories that are painful or more difficult. Do those stick with you and sort of keep you in that discomfort, or when you finish writing them, is there a kind of catharsis?
Not, it doesn't stick with me necessarily. It's just, I love writing. And so I write the things that I write, and I really enjoy doing it. And it's really sometimes wonderful to read, when I do these kinds of readings, or like when Anna was reading pieces from it, or I listen to a recording of, the novels. It's just, it's almost like it's just something that I'm admiring that's not necessarily mine anymore. It's just something I wrote, and I really loved writing it, and now it's there. And I would say that there are certain things that I write that, or I'm in the process of writing, that might be cathartic, in the sense that I'm accumulating a lot of things that I want to write about that are difficult to deal with right now, but I know that I'm going to make art out of it. And so there's catharsis in that, in knowing that that it's going to get transformed into this other thing. So yeah. Thanks for those questions. Those are good questions.
Any other questions from anyone? Tim says, what's the most striking thing that you learned or that was reified for you from the process of writing this book, this collection of stories?
I think Fault Lines was a story that I guess what I learned from that is a constant learning for writers, I think, is the tiniest things and how long it might take for that tiny thing to be turned into something. So there was a very small interaction that I observed that became Fault Lines. And then all these other people, these characters got built up around that tiny little fragment. But that fragment that brought the story into being happened almost 20 years ago. But it stayed there somehow, percolating in my head until 20 years later, it got written into this thing. So it's a nice thing to learn, I think, that all of the things that are happening they don't all turn into something, but they all have the potential to turn into something, which is, it's kind of like carrying around a basket of ingredients all the time. Any time you might whip up some lovely, edible thing, or a terrible thing that you force people who love you to eat, or you keep eating because you come from a culture like mine where you don't waste food. So if you cooked it, you're going to eat it, even if it's terrible.
Or it's terrible, but you've carried it so far away from home that now it feels wonderful.
That's true.
Like
too.
home, because it tastes like home. Joan, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I read a few of the stories today, and I'm very, very sorry I didn't read the Kobe story. The Kobe story was such a the Kobe event was such an event, particularly locally. I live nearby in the neighborhood, and I guess what I'm asking is a tiny little synopsis of what you wrote and how you chose to write about Kobe. And I'm not sure you wrote about what exactly you wrote about him, but could you please just say a little bit of something about that? And I will add, I had the experience of going to Lower Merion High School with Kobe Bryant's photographer, Andrew Bernstein, a year before he passed away. And so I was all over Lower Merion, even in the sports locker room, looking at all the memorabilia of Kobe and looking at the gymnasium that was in his name, and how wonderful that experience was. And then all of a sudden, a year later, terrible tragedy and fraught with all sorts of meaning, and I don't know. Anyway, could you just tell me a little bit about how you got interested in writing about it and what it is about?
I guess mythology. I mean, Rania, my daughter who was asking, that was her favorite story, so she talks about it too. And I think I would quote her because she says, Kobe, even reading the story for her, she realized that she went to Lower Merion High School, and well, all of them did. But then how you take these characters and you make and they're mythological and they become part of your mythology too, even if you have nothing to do with them. Like, she didn't play basketball. She was she was a runner and a swimmer, but somehow Kobe was mattered in this way that was because he was so big and he was massive in the country, but he was sort of superhuman at Lower Merion. And so I guess that's what I was trying to write about, is how someone like this can have this impact on the teacher and the other young basketball player, who both of whom have a relationship with Kobe, and how that relationship changed them. And there are people who, unlike my daughter, really interacted with Kobe on a very level. So that, in a nutshell, is what the story is about. And I see that Tim and Ellen, oh no, I answered Tim's question. Ellen had a question about whether there's a theme that I have yet to write. Yeah, there are. I mean, there's those other projects I'm working on, but we'll see, where they go and what happens to them. If nothing else, I know that I'll have a great time writing them. Yeah.
Well, I think it's almost 8, so I think we've reached an end to this. Ru, thank you so much for the reading at the beginning, and Anna, thank you so much for bringing such passion to this and helping to bring out so much of the beauty of it from within these different stories. I really appreciate the conversation that you came here to have tonight very much. So
thank you, Anna. And I don't think there's been anyone it's quite so prepared on overnight. I'm going to hold up my.
So next time we meet, you all have to have at least as many bookmarks in your books. Thank you very much, Ru, for a beautiful book, and thank you, Maine Point Books, for hosting this event. And congratulations, Ru, and congratulations to all of you who have yet to read this marvelous collection of short stories. Enjoy it.
And thanks to Blue Stoop. If you follow Blue Stoop on any social media platform, Ru's book is the book of the month, and they have all kinds of wonderful interviews with her and her daughters and all kinds of other great information about her and about the book. So follow Blue Stoop. Also, you should sign up for their writing classes because they're amazing. So follow Blue Stoop and you can find out a lot more about the book and about the background to the book.
And just to say, the interviews with my daughters are because the book is dedicated to the 3 of them. So the interviews follow from that.
Right. But it's just a lovely way into the book to spend some time with Blue Stoop site and see what they have up on there. So thank you so much, everyone.
Bye-bye.